Welcome. This presentation, Mountain Lions, A Personal Journey, is an opportunity for me to share the stories I'm most passionate about, studying and filming mountain lions, primarily in northern Colorado over the last 20 years. I'll share the habitat that mountain lions require and why, the wildlife species they interact with, both predator and prey, the unbelievable impact they have on the ecosystem, and tips for staying safe in mountain lion country. A big thanks to the Bear Creek Nature Center for hosting this presentation. Okay, we begin in northwest Montana, the Cabinet Mountains Wilderness Area, my backyard growing up in Libby, Montana, where all three apex predators called home: grizzly bears, wolves, mountain lions, bobcats, coyotes, fox, wolverines. This is a wild place. And I was so fortunate to grow up right next to it. Snowshoe Peak in the middle of the range is a favorite peak to climb and spend time around. Alaska Peak, which I'll share more about in a minute, and then Kearney Peak. That was the first peak that I climbed when I was 10 years old. And at the very southern end of the range is Barry Lake, where I enjoyed many winter camping trips, the coldest of which was 55 below. That green dot in the middle of town, that's where I grew up. One of my first major hikes into the wilderness area when I was 8 years old was up to Granite Lake. This is the view going up Granite Creek. It's a 6-mile hike. Hiked up there with my family. I got to the lake and I was just blown away. My daughter took this picture a few years ago. This is where I was standing at age 8, looking out at Granite Lake, a peak on the right, Snowshoe Peak in the back. You can barely see it back there under the cloud. My dad came down, stood next to me reverently, didn't say anything for a couple minutes, and then he said, "It's beautiful, isn't it?" And I responded, "Dad, I'm going to be doing a lot of this." A few years later, I was able to make it up to A Peak with my good friend Jonathan Kempf. We also climbed Snowshoe Peak. And a few years later, took my brother up there when he was 9 years old. At the end of every summer, right before school started, we would climb a peak to end the summer. At the end of my 6th grade year, I was 12, Jack Clausen and I decided to climb Alaska Peak, that peak in the upper right there. It's crazy steep, lots of alder that you have to wade through. Hopefully find a dry waterfall to climb up to avoid the brush. We made our way up. Unfortunately, we had his dog, Skippy, with us, an Australian Shepherd that was really out of shape. We got up to the base of the peak. We still had 300 feet left to go, and the sun was going down. We knew we were in a bad position. So back then, flashlights lasted at most an hour, typically a half an hour, and then we're toast. Halfway down that slope, our flashlights were out, and we were just going by the light of the moon. It was a half moon, partly cloudy day. This is a view looking down the slope that we descended. Jack thought it might be a better idea to go down the creek and try and stay out of the brush. I didn't like the idea of getting wet and possibly twisting an ankle, climbing over logs in the creek. So I convinced him to go through the brush. And then when we got to the avalanche chutes, we would make hay and try and make as much progress as we could. We had 5 miles yet to go to get back to the vehicle. We were working our way through the brush and looked like there was an opening coming up. We got to the opening and the dog started to growl. Jack thought he saw a stump, but it wasn't. There was a grizzly bear out in front of us about 100 yards. Again, it was nighttime, and Jack thought it was a stump, but then that stump stood on its hind legs and we could see the hump in the back. We knew it was a grizzly. And then it got down on all fours, quartered toward us, and then ran down into the creek and growled. I've never heard a bear so loud, just roar, tearing brush apart. We went up the avalanche chute as far as we could to get away from the bear. When we got back to the truck, I said to Jack, I said, you know, we cannot tell our parents about this because they won't let us come up here. We were actually more afraid of our parents finding out than of the bear. And we didn't say anything to anybody for 3 years until there was a story in the Western News, in the local paper, sharing about grizzly sightings up Bear Creek. And then we let people know that we had seen one up there. That was the end of my 6th grade year, and spent a lot of time up here after that and never had another bear problem. This second story takes place, about 4 years later. My good friend Jonathan Kempf and I, we were on the north end of the range. You see the trail noted in green there. We were making our way around the backside of Dome Mountain, and it was in June, early June. There was still snow and mud on the trail. Jonathan was ahead of me, and we saw these tracks, and we looked down in the mud and the snow. We were both standing there, looking at the tracks, not saying anything. We raised our heads and looked at each other, and at the exact same time, we said, woodland caribou. Neither of us had ever seen a woodland caribou. We didn't know anybody that had seen a woodland caribou in the Cabinet Mountains wilderness area. We took pictures. Jonathan always carried a ruler with him, and we took pictures of those tracks with his ruler laying in the snow and the mud. Had the film developed long before digital cameras. Then we took those pictures into the local biologist, Jerry Brown, and before we showed them to him, we said, Mr. Brown, we have pictures of woodland caribou tracks on the backside of Dome Mountain. And he laughed at us. And then we took the pictures out and we plopped them on his desk. And he said, those are woodland caribou tracks. And we said, yes, that's what we said. And he said, I'm so sorry. How in the world did you know? And so we told him. He went up there the next day to confirm what we had seen. There was a lot of excitement about this because it was rare for these woodland caribou to come out of Canada that far south into this range. And it was just a thrill to find those tracks and share them with a local biologist. Years later, I was able to watch caribou up in the Northwest Territories and really fell in love with the animal. They're just such an amazing creature, surviving on lichen and really harsh conditions. Well, when I moved to Colorado, wild was in my bloodstream. I had to not only find wild places to explore, but I wanted more than that. I wanted to study and film the wildest animal that I could find. And as it turned out, after being face bumped by a mountain lion in the Never Summer Wilderness, that kind of cinched it for me. And I do feel that the mountain lion is the wildest animal. It's the only apex predator we have in Colorado that is found throughout the entire state. And we'll see how wolves progress here in the next decades. This is an area northwest of Fort Collins that I just love. I just never run into anybody up here, and it's a place I know I can film completely wild behavior of mountain lions and other wildlife. Here you have a male lion making a scrape. It's a territorial scrape in the bottom of a valley. He's smelling to see what other animals have been there. There was a bobcat that was using that log where his chin is as a scratching post and may have urinated there. About a mile away, I captured this footage of a adult female and two young juveniles. Here they are during the day. Oh, I just love this clip. There's something about filming wildlife, especially an apex predator, and watching completely wild behavior not influenced by my human scent or my presence. I just love it. Mountain lions, they are a cool animal for many reasons. First of all, they're an apex predator, one of the three that we have in the lower 48, along with grizzlies and wolves. Of the three, a mountain lion is the only obligate carnivore, meaning they can only eat meat. They can only digest meat. So what does that mean compared to a grizzly that's an omnivore and a wolf that will also eat plant material? They'll eat berries, and just like a domestic dog will eat grass to calm its digestive tract, a wolf will do the same thing. So a mountain lion, being an obligate carnivore, means what? It has to kill everything that it eats. When the kittens or cubs are young, the mom, the adult female, is killing prey to feed her young after they're weaned. And once they get big enough to hunt on their own, they start off hunting small animals, mice, voles, wood rats, rabbits, Merriam's turkeys that we have around here. And then once they leave the litter, then they're going after mule deer primarily in Colorado. So mountain lions have to kill everything that they eat, and so they must have prey where they live. They cannot consume plant material, so they've got to follow herds of deer around in order to survive. A couple more cool things about mountain lions. Our jaw moves side to side, our lower jaw. Mountain lions does not. Their lower jaw is fixed, allowing them to exert great pressure. So imagine a deer's moving, a mountain lion's in midair, and its canines have to come down and sever the spinal column of that deer within a quarter of an inch. I saw a couple years ago where a female lion, probably around 110 pounds, came over a fence on this hillside. The next two bounds in the snow were 16 feet apart, and then it jumped up onto the spine of a bull elk, sunk its canines into the spinal column. That elk only went 15 yards, went down, there was a death circle there, and then this lion takes this elk, which is probably close to 400 pounds, so you got a 110-pound lion, grabs the face of this, the head of this bull elk, and drags it down the fence line about 100 yards. That's amazing. They are well designed for what they do. Their back legs are longer than their front legs, allowing them to leap from a sitting position, leap up into a tree. They can leap as far as 16 feet from a sitting position. Unbelievable what these mountain lions are able to do. They have, as a percentage, they have more rods in their eyes than cones, allowing them to see really well during that transition time. So in the evening from light to dark, in the morning from dark to light, they can see better during that transition time than the prey that they're going after. Deer, elk, caribou, moose, they have an advantage. So they love to hunt during that transition time. This female adult lion and one of her kittens is feeding on a white-tailed buck. This was captured in Montana, northwest Montana, where I grew up. The female lion killed this buck above a logging road, dragged it across the road. That's how we found her and found the carcass. Then down a steep bank and onto a flat where she covered the carcass with more than a foot of snow. There was a tree available there, set up a camera, and got a lot of incredible footage. Sauntering in nature. I think it's a requirement to really see and feel and experience everything out there. And it helps to spend time with somebody who is a saunterer. Jenny is a saunterer. And with her help, I'm able to see things that I wouldn't see otherwise. She saw this in this little pool of water. Look at the water droplets on those leaves and the reflection of the sun. I mean, this is really beautiful, and I may have completely missed it had I not been sauntering with her. Here's another example. Just these beautiful ferns casting a shadow. I thought I was quite observant, but I still have a ways to go. I also love the angle. A lot of times she's laying flat on the ground, looking up through things. This beautiful thistle. When we were in the snowmass, Maroon Bell snowmass wilderness, we found these flowers, these Indian paintbrush, this color at 12,000 feet and above. Blew me away. They were all that color. I'm getting better at sauntering. Red Mountain Open Space. I love going up there, especially with Jenny. She is always in a sauntering mood, and we're able to see things that I wouldn't see otherwise. I captured this footage of a bobcat coming up through Bent Rock Canyon. It's like a little mini Zion National Park there. It's so beautiful. And just about 100 yards away, I filmed this blue heron collecting sticks for a nest in the spring. This is such a beautiful area along this creek in the spring, and so worth going up there, especially in April with the wildflowers. One thing that I've noticed in looking at hours and hours and hours of footage, wildlife are saunterers. They're not in a hurry. They move at a sauntering pace. And when I look at clips of different wildlife species, I'm seeing the same tempo regarding their movements over and over and over again. And so by sauntering myself, I'm able to be in lockstep with their rhythm and more likely see things and experience things that I wouldn't otherwise. This is the reason why you can see a black sow with brown cubs. In fact, the sow will mate with more than one boar, and she could have multicolored cubs as a result. This is an interesting clip. So you have a sow and two cubs headed up the trail. As soon as they go around the corner, they turn around for some reason and they come right back down the trail. I don't see that very often, and I'm not quite sure what caused them to do that, but I found it interesting. Here's something else that's interesting. You would think a turkey could not survive living in an area with coyotes, fox, and bobcat, but they do because of their incredible eyesight. As I've said before, all animals, from mice to elephants, do what they can to minimize calorie loss while maximizing calorie gain. And to that end, I have seen bobcats on my cameras coming down a trail where there are turkeys in the same frame, and they don't even look at the turkeys. Too much work. Here is some more beautiful sauntering movements by wolves that are trying to get the last little bit of meat off the skull of a bull moose. And they spent more than one day coming back and feeding on this. I mean, there was like almost nothing left. And not just one wolf. I think it's at one point there were actually 4 wolves feeding on it. One of the most vulnerable times for deer and elk are when they're getting a drink, because their visibility is very limited and it's almost impossible to hear when they're drinking. And they're always very nervous getting a drink. Same thing with pronghorn. They'll be very slow to lower their head, and then they'll snap it back up in less than a third of a second. I just love this clip. This is just one of the many things that lions like to do, groom each other. You can hear the lion kitten purring. There's so much in nature that fits in this category of sauntering. Okay, here we are at my favorite spring. Lion came in, down the hill, stood on this rock, and then walked toward the camera. And this has water for wildlife most of the year. Sometimes it's completely frozen. But it's nice and full now, and looking forward to capturing more footage. And if we're sauntering, we're more likely to see connections in nature. And this is where our experience becomes so much richer. These are those beautiful Indian paintbrush that I mentioned earlier. And here's Jenny. This is just below 13,500 feet up by Independence Pass, east of Aspen. And we saw these beautiful flowers above 12,000 feet everywhere up there. So there was definitely a connection between elevation and where these flowers were growing. We also saw a lot of moths, and the birds were coming in to get those moths. Here's a connection that I learned about, where you have two valleys coming together, and right where they come together, the slope changes from steeper to less steep. So it becomes much more gentle there. And that's where subsurface moisture moves toward the surface. And it creates places like this, where the grass is almost chest high. And beautiful aspen, lots of forbs and grasses and brush. Just beautiful. And you can find these places very easily on Google Earth and then go out and see them on the ground. I love using Google Earth and Gaia GPS together as a pre-scouting tool. They work really well together. What do wildlife need? In this case, for mountain lions, we have this meadow, lone pine meadow. You see the single pine tree out there. And this is a fantastic spot for deer and elk to feed, a lot of times at night. And this slope causes cold air drainage to come off that hillside down in this direction. It is also, we're facing northwest, so in the wintertime, the dominant wind during a high pressure system, and we have 325 days of sunshine in Colorado, so we get a lot of high pressure activity. The dominant wind from the northwest and the cold air drainage are headed in the same direction, right toward us here from that tree. So a mountain lion knows that when they're navigating through here from like 4:30 in the afternoon in the winter until maybe 9 or 10 in the morning the next day, there's going to be cold air drainage coming down here. If the dominant wind is at play, it's going to be headed in the same direction. So a mountain lion can hunt this meadow during a high pressure almost 24 hours a day if they wanted to. And they will come through here and stay concealed back in the trees and the rocks. Another interesting thing is that out here, just to the left of that tree, this hillside slopes toward the south. And so in March, late March, April, this hillside is going to green up first and cause a huge magnet for deer and elk. And the predators know that, in this case a mountain lion, and they will concentrate their activity anywhere the ungulates, the hoofed animals, deer and elk, are concentrated. So these spots I can actually find, now that I know what's going on, I can actually find these spots on Google Earth. On the other side of this main ridge, and this main ridge up there against the skyline runs north-south. There are finger ridges coming down that run east-west, and each finger ridge has a south fold. Same thing is going to happen up there late March, April, where the deer and elk are going to be concentrated on those south folds going after the grass. So anytime an ungulate can change from eating browse, the ends of brush here, they eat a lot of mountain mahogany in the wintertime. Anytime they can change from brush back to grass, they're going to do that because the nutritional value of green grass is higher than eating the ends of brush. All animals are hardwired to minimize calorie loss while maximizing calorie gain. So this is an example of what wildlife need. I set up my camera and I captured a lot of interesting things. But I had small animals, rabbits, mice and voles, wood rats, birds, chipmunks, come and sit on this stump, and that's not really what I was after. Well, I was going to kick it out of the way, and then I noticed in a little crack on the top there was some hair. It's like, wow, this looks like something was rubbing on it. I better leave it. A few days later, look what showed up. Not just one mountain lion, but two. I couldn't believe it. I am so glad I did not kick that stump out of the way. And finally, home in nature. Nature has always been my home. That's where I'm most at peace. And there are certain places, like this meadow up in the Rewa Wilderness, where I've spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours watching wildlife. It's such a beautiful place. I have a lot of footage of elk. This is one of my favorite clips. It's way out in the middle of nowhere. These elk would never put up with my human scent or presence. And when I collected the footage on the following day, I saw their tracks in the snow. I don't know, for some reason, this short little clip just means a lot to me in terms of a huge exclamation point behind wild. And here are two mountain lions. About 20 minutes after they mated, they came in and laid down in front of another camera that I had in the valley. How lucky was I to capture this relaxed footage of mountain lions. One of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves is spending time alone in a wild place. Simply being quiet and absorbing what nature has to offer through all our senses. Catch the flight of a bird or a bobcat's tail as it jumps over a log. Smell the fragrance of pine needles bathed in early morning sunshine. Hear the melody of a nearby brook and the wind through the trees. Feel the bark of a tree that started growing long before Lewis and Clark set out on their journey. Taste the fresh leaves of glacier lily, some of the most exquisite greens you'll ever eat. Finish the day with a campfire and sleep on the ground where you can watch the flames while you drift off. Restore your soul, clear your mind, and dream bigger dreams. Enjoy solitude in nature.